doing some research about our next guest, I found a quote or something about what she said that really grabbed my attention. And I said like this: because a change of any kind is frightening to most people, leaders have to narrate the journey from here to there and back again with clarity and conviction and most of the empathy. Today, in Disrupt Everything podcast series, and as I'm talking in English, it's just because we have an international guest, a worldwide disruptor. We have Patti Sanchez. Patti, welcome to Disrupt Everything podcast series.
Thank you so much. I'm excited.
So we have today a new disruptor in the world of media, communication, storytelling. Hero's journey is Patti Sanchez. Disrupt Everything podcast series is a podcast that it was created with the solely purpose of dissecting and deconstructing worldwide disruptors, top performers, people who is making a ruckus, people who is changing not just the game, but also the rules. The rules are created only to break them, right? These people that are creating this ruckus in this world, people that is a role model for us. So understanding, knowing them better is the one of the goals of this podcast. It's a podcast about human potential. It's a podcast about exponential growth. It's a podcast about reinventing ourselves, disrupting ourselves in order to reinvent everything else, in order to disrupt everything else. And today we're gonna focus on Patti's life, career, and his whole world, because I think I know is really, really provocative and interesting. Get her to know him better. Patti Sanchez is a communicator with over 25 years of experience leading transformative marketing initiatives for brands, coaches, and also co-author of the award-winning book Illuminate, Ignite Change Through Speeches, Stories, Ceremonies, and Symbols, together with co-writing with Nancy Duarte, which we had in the past episodes as a guest. She's also Chief Strategy Officer for Duarte. Patti leads an expert team of writers, consultants who help clients create compelling presentations that change beliefs and behavior. This is Disrupt Everything podcast series. Today, Patti Sanchez. Patti, which Patti? I have wanted to share with all of you a bit more about Patti, and I find some interesting insights which I put together. She said that I was saying that applying insights from her study of psychology and persuasion, Patti helps leaders to understand the inner knowledge of the human mind and heart. That's really interesting for communication and also persuasion, and then use that knowledge to craft engaging narratives that go through the clutter and resonate in a deeper level. She has presented hundreds of workshops on communication to marketing and sales, also for sales leaders around the country, and her professional work has been honored by EABC, BMA, and also Vital Speeches of the Day and Action. Additionally, her writing, my Spanish accent, her writing has been featured in the Harvard Business Review. Patti holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Relations from San Jose State University and a minor in psychology. Patti has written this best-selling book I just mentioned, Illuminate, and her latest book is really relevant in the times we live. It's called Presenting Virtually. It's the basis of most um, of the work. Also, that it needs to be seen today because we have less time, we have less attention, we need to be more original, more creative, more disruptive, more impactful. Um, that's one of the things I want to highlight from Patti's work. And finishing this with also another quote I found: this the hard way that coming up with ideas is easy, and getting others to embrace the ideas is not. Patti, again, so thankful, so blessed, and thank you for being in Disrupt Everything podcast series.
Oh, well, you're blessing me by inviting me. So I really appreciate the opportunity just to have a conversation about how to move people, which is what I think we're in the business of doing.
How do you feel when somebody, when you see your career and when you see so much that you have accomplished? What's the biggest takeaway so far?
Mm. Well, in the early part of my career, I worked mostly as a consultant, a marketing consultant, working with leaders and their companies to help them tell their stories, launch their products, get people excited about those products, all of those things. And I got very motivated by the ideas that did seem very disruptive to me, that they were really going to solve a problem that was intractable, that people struggled with, or that was a novel way to get work done. And I got very excited about that. But as I've pivoted, or maybe just slid into training people, teaching people how to do it themselves, I find that even more rewarding work for me to give people the tools to be able to tell their own stories. Because I think sometimes I feel like consultants get, I'm going to say, a little too much credit for solving the problem, when really a lot of times the really great ideas start with something that my customer told me, and they actually just struggle to get out of their own way to communicate that well themselves. And I'm just really motivated to help people build those muscles on their own so that not only in those big moments when they have the money to hire a consultant to make their communication better, but in those everyday interactions, they can communicate more clearly, more creatively, more empathetically. I think that's really world changing.
Patti, what's can you name or can you recall the the moments in your life that have touched you profoundly?
Well, it goes all the way back to the first moment that I decided I wanted to be in the communication industry and that I wanted to focus on speech, presentations, that medium. And it might sound a little corny, but when I was in high school as a teenager, we had an assembly. I don't know if everyone has assemblies, but they gather all the students together and you bring in an outside speaker. And the outside speaker who came in to speak to us was an ex-convict, someone who had been in prison for crimes, I think drug-related crimes, and he was there to speak to us about what his story, how he ended up in prison, and what he wanted us to learn from his experience that would make our lives better. And when I listened to him speak, I thought, well, first of all, I don't want to do what he did because I like my freedom. I don't want to go to prison. So let me just take a second thought about these choices I'm making right now. Uh, but I also was watching him thinking, that's a job? Is that a thing you can do? Is you can just walk around and tell people your story and leave them feeling more excited about the future? That's a job I'd like to have. I think that was a defining moment in my career early on, anyway.
What What do you think? what do you think the secret? What do you think the secrets of your craft are, Patty? Like on presenting, on persuasion, on building this muscle, this story, and being able to tell this story. What's, if I can say, secrets or maybe
Yeah.
the strong points?
Well, I think one is having a clear idea of what you want to say. A lot of times when I work with people who are trying to communicate something, a leader, they have a lot of things they want to say. I want to tell you this and this and this and this, and ultimately I want you to do this, and and there's too much. The audience is only going to remember, five things plus or minus two, and so you need to narrow it down, right? So that's the first discipline of great communication is clarity, is eliminating, getting rid of the too much so that you have focus and the audience can understand what you're really saying and not be distracted by what Nancy Duarte talks about as the signal versus the noise. The signal is the main message, and everything else that doesn't support it is noise. So that's the first discipline of great communication, I think. The second is really, I'm going to say it all comes down to empathy. There's a lot of value in creativity in and of itself. And when people would come to me or the organization I work for and say, I really am trying to get people to buy into this idea and it's not landing well, and I need something really creative. I need wow, bang, zoom, opening. I think that's going to solve it for me. I just really, really like Gambit, that's going to grab them by the lapels. And yeah, there's some value in that. But if you aren't saying something that matters to the people you're talking to, ultimately, I think your message is going to fall flat. You have to figure out what I mean by empathy is why are they even there in the first place? Why are they listening to you? What is the problem they have that needs solving? How can you articulate your solution in terms that they will not only understand but resonate with? And that takes a little bit of thought. It takes a little bit of study. It takes a little bit of planning, and it takes you getting out of your own head and setting, I'm going to say, your ego aside for a couple minutes so that you can really understand what's important to them and thus say what is important to them and say it in the way that is going to actually move them.
Paddy, este, so how leaders today are they leaders, are today's leaders empathetic, and how can they be more empathetic? Because that's, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to tell the story, I think I totally agree. It all comes to use empathy.
A lot of leaders have trouble, in my experience, truly empathizing with their audience, particularly internal audiences, employees, because they think they're so focused on the goal that the business needs to achieve. And no matter what, whether you're coming along with me or not, this business is going to double, or we're going to lay these people off, or we're going to make this change because the leader has studied it long enough to have certainty that it's the right thing to do. And they're also motivated to do it. They're compensated to do it. So their drive is very strong. And that drive can get in the way of seeing why other people might not be driven to do that thing too. So it's a practice. I think it's like any other thing you would need to do to be healthy. To be a high performance leader, what are other things leaders do to be high performance? They eat well, they exercise, they practice their craft, they learn, they study the functions that they need to get better at as a leader of their business. And I would argue that empathy is another one of those disciplines that you need to practice. And even by just asking yourself a question before you speak to a group of people, how do I think they're thinking about or feeling about this thing I'm going to tell them? How do I want them to think or feel when I'm done speaking? That at least gets them outside of their own head. And So I think it's in a lot of ways leaders have forces working against them and make it difficult for them to think about other people because they're thinking about their objectives so much and they have all those motivations in place to achieve them. I also think that more leaders are learning empathy right now in the course of the past 2 years because they've had to, because they've also experienced difficulty and they've seen, if they're paying any attention at all, that their employees are experiencing difficulty and their customers are. And unless you have a granite rock for a heart, I gotta believe you're sensing some people's pain, some people's fear, and if you're a real leader, you will lean into that and try to help them move through it.
Patti, and also, how do you, or what strategies do you follow for talking about leadership, presenting, and also about the job of telling the story, go from place to place? What are the techniques that have served you the most in public speaking?
Yeah. The planning is the act. I do a lot, meaning before I talk, I sit down, I think about the audience that I was going to be speaking to, what I was just describing. I think about who they are. I think about how they might perceive me. I think about how they might perceive the topic, and I make some notes to myself about their perceptions and what I might need to say or do to change them. And I talk about that in my books, and we teach it in our workshops because we believe it's essential. It's the place to start to ask yourself some questions about what the audience is thinking or feeling. And when you're a leader and you don't have direct interaction with those people day to day, then you need to ask other people questions about what your audience is thinking or feeling. And that involves not just planning, but research. And I've worked with leaders who were where they needed to communicate a major change to their organization, and they were really set on describing it in a certain way. And I said, well, let me just check with a couple of your people how that
Mm.
might be received. So I'll talk to some people in the human resources organization. And I'll say, let me talk to a couple of your salespeople or whoever the impacted audience is. And I ask them, what do you think about this thing? What are your questions? What are your fears? What are your concerns? What would you need to hear to feel good about this strategy? And then I'll take that back to the leader and say, just 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 consider for a second that your perspective is not what everybody else shares. Let me tell you what other people are saying, thinking, and feeling, and here's how I recommend you should change your message so that it responds to what they really need to hear. So either do it in your own mind, ask yourself some questions, or go out and talk to some people who actually represent that audience, and that should give you a sense of where you need to start to make your message more receivable to them.
Do you follow any particular framework for creating stories that resonate?
Well, certainly the three-act structure is the classic form that all stories follow in literature and cinema, and so it's the structure that we use also when crafting content, both really a narrative, which is all the messages you would say at a point in time or over time. Those actually can be shaped into a beginning, middle, and end. But also an actual anecdote, a story you tell about a customer who is facing a particular problem and how you solved it can follow that three-act structure. A story you tell about a time in your life when you faced a crisis and how you overcame it can be shaped into that three-act structure, beginning, middle, and end.
Will you um, do you emphasize any of the three? What you emphasize any of the three? Or
Well, when I'm working with leaders to help them tell personal stories, for instance, and in that story I just told you about a leader who wanted to launch a strategy, and I advised him how he should frame it. I said, you also need to tell a story about how you have done something like this in the past so that they will feel more confident that you're capable of leading them in this moment. And when I'm working on a story like that with a leader, I always start with the end. So I do a little kind of brainstorming with them. Where in your life, in similar situations, have you dealt with this kind of issue where you've tried to achieve a really ridiculous goal, which is basically like what you're asking your people to do this year? It's kind of like climbing a mountain. It almost seems impossible, right? Where have you done something like this in your past career? And then we'll talk about a few different situations. And as the leader's telling me those individual stories, I'm saying, so what is the main point of that story? What would you want them to walk away thinking and feeling at the end of that story? And sometimes the leader is just telling me a story about a success, and really without admitting it, what they're really trying to say is, I'm awesome. Just trust me. I always win. Everything I do works out. And I said to this particular leader, people don't believe that. And they don't believe it because every single one of us has failed at something at least once. And I'm sure that you have. And you'll get more credibility with them if you also tell a story about a time when you tried something like this and you failed at it, and what you learned that you're not going to do this time. So that, again, they can feel confident that either way, you have the right strategy and the ability to lead them through this time. And so that's the end of the story. Basically, to simplify the 3-act structure, it starts by meeting a hero, which is a person who's just trying to do their life until something happens to them, which is just in literature, it's called the inciting incident. It's a planet gets bombed and somebody, like a Luke Skywalker, has to choose to go help save these people, right? So that's just the beginning of the story that motivates them to go on a journey. And then the middle of the story is where that hero essentially tries to achieve their goal, but encounters all kinds of obstacles and tests, and they struggle and they fail and things go wrong. But eventually they overcome. In most stories, that's the positive outcome story, happy ending. They overcome, and in the end, they achieve their goal and they learn something. They're changed in some way, I'll say. And for us in everyday life as basic humans, not, superstars or heroes in movies, for us, the transformation comes in the form often of a change in our circumstance, which is the outer journey. I got that job, or I lost the job. I married my love, or I lost the love. But it also comes in the form of a new awareness, a new understanding, which is the lesson. What did you learn about yourself through that experience, and that you're taking forward with you, that has become an insight that you can use in the rest of your life? And when you know what the insight is after deciding what story you want to tell people, that becomes basically the gift you're giving them by telling them the story. When you've come to a realization that this experience taught you a lesson that is worth sharing with other people because it will help them be more successful or avoid failure like you did, you're doing them a service by sharing that story when it communicates something they can take away and use.
So it's all about opening up, being vulnerable, and tell the real story that is happening. Doesn't matter how much it hurts. As you say, let your ego aside, and right.
It's not easy, right? And in my personal life, I tend to be very private. I don't often talk about myself. You're not going to find a lot of interviews out there in the world with me where I tell you all of my secrets. I might leak one or two. I'm working on being more vulnerable, but it's not my natural nature. And then a couple of years ago, somebody I was working with, who's also a storyteller and a coach, said he was working with me on a talk I was going to do. And he was trying to get me to tell a story, ironically. And I didn't want to tell a story about myself. I said, it's not about me. And he said, you're being stingy. You're robbing the people you're speaking to of the opportunity to learn from you by not telling them a story from your own personal experience. You're depriving them of learning. And that hit me really hard, because I always thought, even though I counsel other people to tell story, I was like, I don't want to tell a story because then it would be about me, and I don't have a big ego. I'm very humble and all these things. And basically, in a way, he was saying, well, you're kind of being egotistical by trying to hoard that knowledge for yourself instead of sharing it with other people. I thought, wow. You just cut me to the bone.
Very interesting insight.
Yeah.
Uh, you were saying that there were different, like also coming with this new awareness is also a way of transformation. So, do you have any particular technique or way to be aware of what you learn?
I have a journal I write in sometimes. I want to do it more often. But I think that's a good practice for observing yourself and your life experiences. And at Duarte and in our storytelling workshops, we get people a story journal that prompts them with questions about their experiences at various stages in life and people that they've met and things that they have to help people uncover those stories and the lessons that they might be teaching. Um, and I do that from time to time. In my own little journal, I also write about dreams because sometimes I have really vivid dreams and I think they tell me something interesting too,
Mm.
often in a different form, more from the subconscious mind, right? Below the ego. There's good stuff that comes out there.
Um, what what strategies do you follow for presenting virtually and also maximizing the impact of your presentations?
Yeah. Well, this is more of a conversation. So I'm not doing a formal presentation today. But when I do present virtually, I follow a similar method to what I talk about in the book, which is I start by planning. Like I said, I think about my audience, but I more specifically think about the platform I'm going to use to connect with them through, right? Because the technology is a consideration. Will it be easy for them or not? How do I make the experience interesting and effective for them? What kind of information do they need to hear from me? But also, what's the right format for this presentation? Because the technology gives me options. And the way that I think about it is there are fundamentally three kinds of presentations, especially virtual ones or ones that involve some kind of technology. There's what I call the linear presentation, which is like a monologue. I'm going to stand here and talk to you for 20 minutes about something. A TED Talk is a linear presentation because there's not a lot of interaction. You might see the audience react, but it's me telling you beginning to end my story, my ideas, and then I might take some questions at the end. Then the second type is a more interactive kind of presentation. I think of these in the marketing world as being more like the webinars, panel conversations where there are segments of information I share, or I have maybe a second presenter sharing, but in between we pause, we do some interaction with the audience, we have a poll, take some questions, other forms of interaction. And then the third type is the collaborative presentation, which is really where this medium uh, surpasses in a lot of ways what we can do with face-to-face presentations because this technology is so powerful and flexible. I mean, like we can be in one of these virtual meeting rooms. We can launch a digital canvas, right? We can start brainstorming together, and it's an infinite canvas. I don't have to worry about how big or small my post-it note pages are. I can write forever because that canvas goes on infinitely. And we at Duarte use Miro or Mural tools like that for a lot of our brainstorms and even internal cultural events. And it's amazing to see how it unlocks people's creativity. I'm doing a collaborative presentation. I do a little thought starter in the beginning, a little bit of setup. And then we go into our mural or Miro board and we sticky note things. And then we come back together and have a conversation. And we send people into breakout rooms to have their own little brainstorms and then come back and share what we learned. And that's some people might not think of that as a presentation. I think our ideas of a presentation are very outdated. It's like a pitch, a dog and pony show. I think people want to be heard more now. I don't think people have the patience to sit and listen to you talk, 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 talk without pausing, without drawing them in, without letting them interact. Because we can do that everywhere in the digital world. So you can't hold them hostage in your virtual presentation.
Amen. What's the most powerful thing you have learned in more than 25 years as a communicator?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with storytelling and vulnerability. I have new appreciation for the power of being open, honest, real, raw about your own life experiences, but even just being honest about what you're feeling in a moment as a leader. Uh, I mean, I think I grew up thinking that leaders, I put them on a pedestal. They had to be perfect, uh, infallible. And then that's one of the reasons why for a long time I didn't think of myself as a leader, in the like a Kennedy, that you have your portrait on the wall. I held them in such high esteem, and I thought that there's no way I could get to that level of perfection as a human being, and let them be the leaders. And then I realized, especially during the past, I would say 5, 10 years of my career, that it's impossible to be perfect. No leader is infallible. And in fact, the best ones own their mistakes and talk about them, because people can learn more from your mistakes than they can learn from your successes. And I think that's the thing that changed me most as a human, collaborating with somebody like Nancy Duarte, who's a very open and vulnerable leader,
It is.
seeing how that works, the effect that it has on her people and on our customers. And uh, I'm a believer now.
Tadi, what are your best daily tricks, daily small tricks in persuasion?
Tiny little things like with virtual communication, I really had to work hard at looking into the camera lens. Not looking at myself, which I periodically do right now. I want to turn me off because I'm such a distraction to me, which is ironic. It's probably the best way to describe ego, right? I'm distracting me. Um, I so doing that, and when I present with that, my eyes locked on the camera, my full being present in this digital space, I know I connect better with people. I know they feel my passion for what I'm talking about better. Uh, it's a tiny thing, but it's also a monumental thing because it's hard to do. And I'm passionate about it. I know it sounds silly and insignificant, but when I was researching and writing, presenting virtually, one of the things that got me most excited about this medium is the challenge of creating intimacy at a distance. And people in uh, television, I think, have learned how to do this well. Our most beloved TV personalities do this well. Our most beloved actors do this well, maybe musicians, but understand how to connect with each person, make anyone who's watching you feel like you're talking just to them. I admire all of you who can just do that naturally. It was work for me.
Um, one of the examples that comes in mind when you say like the celebrities or stars or actors is Jamie Foxx.
Oh, yeah. He's amazing.
This guy has something that I haven't seen in other in 100 like actors. He connects with everyone. He's raw. He's
Yes.
memorable. Yeah, yeah. It just came always to my mind. Hope one
Yes.
day we can have it in the podcast too.
Yes. Oh, he'd be an incredible guest, no doubt. Yeah. Well, and I'm listening to an audiobook of the actor Viola Davis, her autobiography, and I feel so present with her. Just the way that she's speaking, so personally, so intimately. It's not just the words; it's her delivery that makes me feel like she's really right there. So anyway, I'm passionate about it because I believe that technology is both a blessing and a curse. And it's a curse in that it can divide us, it can disintermediate human interaction. It does, just naturally. And the blessing is if we learn how to overcome that, to use it to connect more deeply with each other, to really understand each other, to unite with each other. I think that's the best possible use of technology.
After all these years in marketing, advertising, and also communication in these three fields, what, what, yeah, which insights or what insights can you share with us, Patti?
Well, storytelling, I think, is still very much in vogue. I was worried that it would just be a trend and disappear. Because a lot of people hopped on the bandwagon about it a few years ago, and everybody was talking about storytelling, and it's this tweet is a story, and that poster is a story, and this 10-second video is a story, and we have our own perspective on what a real story is, that 3-act structure, right? And unpacking each stage of the journey for the audience. But I'm glad to hear that story is still seen as a valuable tool, because I think it is. I know that it works, and research shows that it does actually is more memorable, for instance, than just facts alone. Research shows that our minds and our bodies actually get into sync with each other when we hear stories together. So that's profound, and I'm glad it's still around. Um, Something that I'm also passionate about, because I believe empathy is so important, is I have antibodies to manipulation. I would love to see our industry be as concerned about the impact of our messages on people, and as interested in helping our audience feel agency, power, that where we go beyond superficial messages designed just to sell a product, but we stand for something. And I think that's another movement that's been really powerful in marketing, is something also that a younger generation is dragging us toward, which is having a clear purpose, having values, communicating them. Your brand is your purpose and your values. It's not just about your product, and it's not just about the value that you generate for investors. When we all are serving a greater purpose with the work we do, we are truly being disruptive, because we're changing how people live, not just changing what they buy.
Hmm. I was reading in a book, a Guide to a Good Life from William V. Irvine. He was saying that about the stoicism, that we just resonate with the people that we share values. But if those my question is, if we don't share values with almost anyone, because values are not present in the industry, in the media, in people, so we are not connecting, really truly connecting with anyone.
Yeah, it's superficial, and that's why I say it can feel like manipulation. I'm saying what I need to say to make you like my product or my brand, uh, uh, and I'm. It's kind of like a suit I'm putting on, so that I make the right impression, I have the right effect, but people can smell when it's not really true, when you're not really interested in them and their success and their happiness. And I, what it's because I'm middle aged. I've been, I'm in my 50s. I grew up, yeah, I grew up with very traditional model of advertising and marketing, David Ogilvy, and there's still a lot that's brilliant about it. But Mad Men summed it up well. It was, the TV show on AMC. Don Draper was an operator, and there wasn't a lot of integrity to him or what he and his people were doing. I mean, he was good. He was a good man ultimately. I'm not trying to throw shade on Don Draper, because I really did like the character. I'm just saying that it's a new era. It's a new era for marketing and advertising. It's a new era for the world, to affect true change. Brands are more respected. You know this. We've seen the Edelman Trust Barometer report. They're more trusted than most government entities, or other organizations. People are looking to brands to
Incredible.
solve really hard problems in the world because maybe our other institutions are failing us. So that's the call to action for us marketers. If we're representing a brand or just the brand of ourselves, how can that brand serve people and solve problems that are truly meaningful, rooted in, a deeper purpose? It's not easy. I mean, it can be polarizing, and I understand that. And we're careful ourselves about what we commit our energy to. Everybody should be. You can't solve everyone's problems. You have to decide which one or two you can really put your energy against. Uh, but I think customers reward you when you do.
I'm really interested to know what's the marketing that nowadays is working more effectively to you as a person and or for your clients as an agency.
Mm. Well, our focus at Duarte is very particular on presentation, so we don't do serve the whole marketing mix. I don't have a lot of opinions about advertising other than what I see and experience as a consumer or other forms of marketing. What I do see in the work that we do that is effective, it goes back to storytelling. It's more about the content to me than it is about the format. I mean, certainly there are new channels emerging all the time. Everybody was experimenting with uh, Clubhouse for a little while. I don't even know how far it spread, but it was a hot thing for a hot minute in
And
Silicon
how about
Valley.
now?
Yeah, so where'd it go? TikTok. I know TikTok's here to stay, but then maybe it'll get acquired, and Instagram and all that. There's always a new medium emerging. And maybe I sound like a cranky old lady, but uh, the ones that are hot now many of them won't be around. There will be a new one, a new darling. And that's the nature of disruption. And that's the great thing about disruption is constant invention, reinvention, progress, hopefully. So that's why I say it comes down to content. The media will continue to evolve, but what you say is still what's going to draw people in and get them to take action. It's about the message and how clearly, creatively, and empathetically you articulate that message.
In that line of vulnerability about yourself opening up, yeah, you were saying, I'm curious to know what personal experiences have shaped you as a professional and vice versa, and why.
I don't know that I can separate myself as a professional from myself as a human. uh, One of the reasons that I care so much about empathy is that it was taught to me by my mother, who was a very feeling and caring person, and she came up from poverty. Really, her family went without food for a good lengths of time. She worked as a little child picking cotton in fields outside Fresno, California, and a child of the Great Depression, which was a huge disruption in the country at the time, the U.S. And that she met a lot of people who were struggling in her childhood through that experience and struggles of her own. She suffered from depression. She suffered from alcoholism. And a lot of what shaped me as a person wanting to help other people, which is what empathy draws me to. Eh, that shaped me as a person wanting to help her, but also seeing her wanting to help other people. She was always inviting people into our home who were struggling, or she was always teaching me and my siblings uh, how to be kinder to people who were struggling or people who were different or people didn't have everything that we had. So that's like 90% of who I am today was shaped by that more than my career.
Very
That
inspiring.
just that's just how I show up in my career is I can't help but worry about you and want to make things better for you. And that shapes how I think about communication. It shapes how I work with my clients. It shapes the kinds of tools I build to teach them how to communicate.
What are your most? What would you say are your most successful daily habits?
Brushing my teeth, I'm pretty good at that. Pausing and reflecting. I get pretty caught up in my work, and it feels kind of chaotic at times, and go from meeting to meeting to meeting and project to project to project. I have gotten better at taking a break in between meetings, just even if it's a couple minutes. Drink some water, take a breath, try to get my head clear again. Ask myself, what do I want out of this meeting? When I'm successful, I do that before each of my meetings. Or to go outside in the backyard because I work from home and sit and listen to the birds for 10 minutes at lunchtime. I don't know. It may not sound very flashy, and I'm definitely not an adrenaline junkie. Well, physical adrenaline. I'm into the mental adrenaline. I'm very into that. But my resets are quiet resets, but they work for me.
How many times do you usually pause and reflect during the day?
Well, now that I have a watch that tells me I should stand up every hour, then I at least stand up every hour. But I would say probably 2 to 3 times a day. It's not every hour. But I've learned to pay attention to my body and how I'm feeling, and some of it's just by necessity. As I get older, the effects of stress, I feel them more. I feel, honestly, past year or 2 years, I started experiencing panic attacks, and I don't ever remember experiencing those. If I did, it was in elementary school. I was a kid, and I was very shy, and I was afraid every time the teacher called on me. But then I built some muscles, I built some skills, some confidence, and it wasn't a problem. But the past couple of years, I actually started experiencing panic attacks, and I started noticing I'm having trouble breathing. And I did some research about that, and basically, you just have to breathe. There's no way around it. You just have to breathe more and more deeply, and that helps your your nervous system regulate itself, get itself back in balance. So yeah, it's not sexy, but breathing and brushing my teeth. Those are my
It's
practices.
it's very very interesting because my entire life is a big hack, which is split into a myriad of lot of hacks. And if I had to say only one, it's just pausing and breathing. No matter how many times. I mean, if you can do 100, better. And if I have to choose one, the most effective is pause, breathe.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I'm with you.
preach it, preach it. Well, I've also been doing a lot of self study. And part of it is because in our organization, we believe in things like psychometrics, like the Enneagram, or motivational value system, other tools that we use to help us understand ourselves. And what I've learned in that process is that I'm very much in my head. Every test I ever take, everything it spits back out. I'm a feeler for sure, but I think my feelings. I'm so in my head. It's like go, 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 go. Idea, idea, idea. Plan, plan, plan. Worry, prepare, recover, to plan again. So it's a very active mind. And what I've learned about the breathing is that I actually do feel. I feel all the time, but I try not to feel, and it becomes a thought instead. Like, how am I going to avoid the situation and deal with it in a different way instead of just, yeah, that was scary. Or I actually feel like I can do this. And the breathing is what gets you to that place. It's first to just put you back in your body so you can feel the feeling, because as one of my coaches says, what do feelings want? To be felt. They don't want anything else. And if you don't feel them, they're going to build up, and they're going to make you feel them when they get to be too much.
Breathing is the ultimate disruption, the ultimate hack. Huh?
That's right. It is.
Incredible, incredible.
Yeah.
How do you stay productive? What your personal productivity techniques that help you the most?
I I use my calendar a lot. I know a lot of people do Trello or other sorts of project management tools, time management tools, but I use my calendar to run my life. And if it's on there, it gets done, and if it's not, it doesn't. But I also block thinking time, not just the meeting time. Because if I don't, it's going to get snagged by a meeting by somebody that I'm working with. So I block out, this is my quiet time, this is my thinking time. This is actually, it's called focus time, which is started with the algorithm that's in the Microsoft suite that we use at work. And it actually tells you how much of your time you're using for focus or not focus. And that was really an aha for me when I started getting these little insights reports that would say, you spent 89% of your time in collaboration last week and you had very little focus time. Well, that was a big aha, because I can't have big ideas. I can't make new products if I'm not sitting and focusing on doing that. So that's probably my best hack is block that focus time, clear things away. And then I also just started blocking once a month, one day a month, to remind myself to plan time off.
How do you nurture, or how do you stay in a permanent state of reinvention, working in Duarte in your position, in a job that is ever changing? How do you use any practice, any way to stay in this state of reinvention?
Well, I think it might be a fallacy to say that you can be constantly inventing. I think the human body has cycles it goes through, and so does the mind, just like we were talking about rest. I think we can have an idea, we can execute on that idea, and then we need to pause, reflect, look back, look ahead. And so I'm honest with myself that there are times when I'm doing incremental improvements, and that's okay. And then there are times when now I clear away those incremental improvements and I shift my focus to a new project that is about true innovation. And that needs to be, again, it goes back to scheduling for me, scheduled in a different way. It's a week I clear my calendar for if I'm writing a book like this, just to get my thoughts down and start to organize those thoughts. Or if I'm doing an invention project like I am with my team on a new product we're making that's pretty big and different for us, we blocked a sprint, a 2 week sprint. Everybody came together. Some people were virtual, remote, so it was really a hybrid brainstorm for 2 weeks. And that I find to be a successful way to really get momentum, and because it gives you the space to go through the life cycle of an idea, which is, let us start by planning and thinking about what are we trying to achieve and setting our objectives and what does success look like. And then we go into exploring. Let's go do some research and go away for a while and find some inspiration. Let's come back and let's put it all together. Let's see what patterns emerge. Okay, let's set that aside. Now let's just brainstorm crazy wild thoughts. Okay, then let's come back. Let's prune those. That whole life cycle of an idea takes time and space, and you can't shortcut those steps. Otherwise you're just going to get garbage, just go straight into ideating without thinking or straight into launching without pruning. You have to work through that process.
Do you have any meditative or consciousness related practice? If so, can you share with us?
Mm, I have done a meditation practice at points in my life, more of a Hindu inflected version of meditation. And I found that helpful for a time that I was going through it, but it's really hard for me to practice that, if I'm being honest, because I'm so in my head. The monkey mind, as they call it, is always just, so I did a silent retreat once about 10 years ago in between jobs. So it was right before I came to Duarte, or right around the time I came to Duarte, and I wanted to do a hard reset. I need to clear that old era off me so I can welcome in this new era, this new role, this new vision of myself. And so I did a silent retreat for, I think it was something like 3 days. And The first aid was the hardest because not not only I didn't quite understand this, but when I signed up for it, not only did I have to like leave my phone at home, and I wasn't supposed to like talk to other people away from the place, but it was a true silent retreat. Like we couldn't talk to each other. Not only could we not talk to each other, but we couldn't look each other in the eye, which was gut wrenching for me. I can't even like feel your feelings with you. I can't look and see the twinkle as you're looking at the sunrise like I am. We can't even look at each other. Are you kidding me? I couldn't write in a journal. I wasn't allowed to put any words in any space of any kind. And as yet there's words in my head. Anyway, so I tried that, is my point. I tried that. I did do it. I didn't leave early. I finished the retreat. But it was very hard for me. So, what I tend to practice more often now is a version of prayer that is, I do actually every evening. I essentially say what I'm grateful for. And then I say some wishes or prayers for other people and for the world. And I find that helps me get calm before sleep, but it also helps me remember why I'm here. And it's really not just about all the little things on my calendar or that stupid thing I said earlier in the day or the thing that I wrote that wasn't that great, which is where my mind tends to go. And it puts my focus on a higher plane. When I practice meditation, what I learned is draw the attention here, what you called the third eye, but that whole idea of the prefrontal cortex, right? Which is where we rise above ourselves, that super ego that can see more than the little self can. And so that practice in the evening puts me in that place of the higher self and saying, there's more to this than all these little things that I was worried about today. And there's more to tomorrow than what I'm worried about for tomorrow.
Last interviewee was Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he was saying that one of his also prayers for grateful is I'm one more day in the paradise. I'm living in heaven on earth every day.
Oh,
Beautiful,
wow.
eh?
It's
Beautiful.
gorgeous.
Yes, and
Well, it's another thing my mom taught me to do too, is just to appreciate what you have. I think coming from poverty and experiencing lots of difficulties, there's always something that you can find to be grateful for, to say thank you for.
what has been your toughest challenge and how you have overcome it?
Fear. Fear is a challenge, and I can't say I have overcome it. Fear of failure, I guess, fear of criticism, fear of irrelevance, fear of dying, all kinds of fears. And these practices we've been talking about are ways I'm trying to get past that fear. And the self study I've been doing about my personality type is helping me understand where that fear comes from. Fear of being abandoned really is a lot of it. And I'm learning other tools I can use to push through the fear, like in the Enneagram types. If anyone's listening, if you know yourself, what your Enneagram is, mine is a 9, which is the peacemaker. But there are numbers nearby that I don't totally understand it, but I've been told you go to 1 when you're in stress, and then there's another that you can use to stretch yourself. And my stretch is a 3, which is the achiever. And I've definitely found that the best way to get myself out of fear is to think about, what am I going to achieve on the other side of this? What is that goal that I really want to reach? And for more often for me, it's about, what is the problem I can solve for other people that makes this worthwhile, that makes my fears irrelevant.
And related to that, and the pacemaker is how do you find peace when everything is at war, or how do you find this? Yeah,
It's hard. I'm feeling it a lot right now. I'm having trouble sleeping. Just a level of agitation about all the conflict in the world, and my type doesn't love conflict, which is a bummer because I have to deal with conflict of all kinds. I mean, we all do, but it's not my favorite thing. And there's so much of it in the world right now that it is really stressful. And that gratitude practice at night is another way that I cope with it, to again find that one little corner of a blanket that I can hold on to that makes me feel at least this part is okay. And
Relate.
then and in my prayer too, I say, please use me, because I believe in a higher power, and I say use me as your instrument, to help me understand how I can be of service and how I can do good in the world. I
That's
don't always get like clear messages about that, but it's definitely a goal.
beautiful. Related to that, how do you feel, or how do you deal with things that are out of your control?
Give it on up. I mean, that's one way that I deal with it. I ask for help. I've learned to ask for help from actual human beings. It's still something I'm working on. To say, and to say, there's something I'm really struggling with, and I realize I'm not capable of doing this all by myself, or there's some specifics, expertise or support I need, and I ask somebody to help me with that. And because I struggle with it, because I want to look totally capable, but I also don't want to burden other people. So it's like a double whammy that makes it harder for me to ask for help. But what I've been doing with people in my life is say, it's hard for me to ask for help, right? And sometimes I'm going to tell you it's okay and I don't need your help. But I would love it if you could say, are you sure? Are you sure there isn't something I can help you with? Are you sure you got this?
Last three questions, Patti, to end the interview. How does your hero's journey looks like?
There's a joke I heard once that a person kept asking somebody who was having lots of difficulties in their life. So, how's it going to end? And he said, I'm not sure yet. How's it going to end? I'm not sure yet. How are things going? I'm not sure yet, I think was actually the question. And that's how I feel, um, because my story isn't over, right? It doesn't have an ending. And while we're alive, all of our stories are inconclusive. Um, I do feel like I've gone on a couple little hero's journeys during my life. And if you ever do the exercise of thinking about your life as a venturescape, like I talk about in the Illuminate book, it actually is a helpful tool to think about. The idea of a venturescape is it describes the journey that you undergo when you're transforming in some way. And it was meant to help leaders lead organizations through change. It describes 5 stages of change that everyone goes through, and they group into 3 acts. Dream and leap are the beginning. Like you have a vision and then you decide to do something about it. Fight and climb are the middle. You encounter obstacles, but as you overcome those obstacles, you get closer to your goal. You climb. And finally, 5 is arrive. Well, none of us are ever really arriving at the end of our life, hopefully, until we really do. But I've gone through a few of those little venturescapes in my life, and I feel successful enough in in the first 54 years, but I'm coming on 55, and so that's why I say inconclusive. I'm thinking about this next venturescape in my life, and what is my vision for it? How do I want it to conclude? And then start to shape that. I mean, I love my job. I'm not talking about going anywhere anytime soon. I'm just thinking about myself and how I want to have impact on the people around me.
What's your recipe for a life worth living?
I think it comes down to being, for me, of service to others. And I don't think that would be everybody's answer, and that's fine. For me, it's about being of service to other people. It's less about what I achieve. If I'm comfortable, that's great. I mean, like, have enough resources to live life comfortably. That's plenty, and I'm happy with that. How I'll really measure myself is whether I had a positive impact on 1 or 5 or 10, maybe 50, I don't know, people, and that their lives were better because they met me or they met something that I made that would make me feel successful.
And Patti, if you were about yes, one extra, what would you say? What would you say if you were back to Patti at her 20s? What would be your advice to her, and what would be the advice of Patti in her 70s?
To my 20 something self, I would say, don't sweat so much. Don't worry so much about what other people think of you in particular. Success is relative. And honestly, most people aren't thinking about you very much at all. They're thinking about themselves. So don't let other people's expectations stop you from taking risks, from doing things you want to do. 70-year-old self would probably say, don't drink so much alcohol. Drink more water. Keep on this like walking thing that you do. When you take the dog for a walk, that's super healthy. Do that more. And you did good.
Patti, the last question is: what would you say to everyone who is watching this video interview, listening this podcast, as a final message in the world we live today, from your own experience, and so for concluding this interview?
Be kind. Please be kind to yourself first, because when you're kind to yourself, you can be kind to others. And what this world needs is more kindness for each other.
Where people can find you in the internet?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Patti Sanchez. Look me up. I connect to pretty much everybody who asks. I have an Instagram account, Patti San, PattiSan, and also on Twitter, Patti San. And you can find all kinds of things about Duarte at www.duarte.com, and all the work that we're doing to help people be better communicators so they can change the world.
We will put all these links in the podcast show notes. Also, the Duarte, your book, Presenting Virtually and Illuminate, will be also featured in the podcast show notes. Is there anything else you want to add or say, Patti?
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for your listeners, because the disruptors are the ones who are doing the hard work that a lot of people shy away from because it's scary, it's intimidating, it's tiring. But keep doing it because we need it.
This is Patti Sanchez. Patti, thank you for participating. Let me say that pronouncing your name is super easy, Patti Sanchez. So I don't have to do any effort when I was just presenting anyone who has to do the rusty English accent. So thank you so much for adding your touch, your humanity, your talent, your everything you got, all these years in the world of communication, your knowledge, your insights, in this rich interview that I'm sure thousands of people is gonna benefit. I'm gonna benefit. Everyone is so you can be sure you're serving a lot of people right now as you've been doing it. Thank you. We're grateful to have you in Disrupt Everything podcast series.
I feel the same. Be well.
This is Patti Sanchez in Disrupt Everything podcast series, and remember to create something inside that provokes something outside, and disrupt, change things for the better is some of the things what we're here for. So let's continue this journey.